The Purging of Jollana. In the year 913.M41, destruction came to the Great Librarian of Jollana. For 3,000 years, Jollana had served as a repository of lost knowledge, unrivaled in scope and scale by any institution beyond the bounds of the solar system. Yet it was Jollana's reputation that ultimately wrought its ruin. The librarian's promise of shrouded knowledge drew the attention of the thrice-reviled chaos sorcerer Ahriman, and he descended upon Jollana in full fury, determined to take its secrets for himself. Jollana's defenders were wiped out, and much of the librarian was ruined. But for all the destruction Jollana had yet seen, worse was to follow. In the wake of Ahriman's attack, 3 companies of Space Marines from the Invaders chapter and a relief army of Imperial Guard arrived at Jollana, their mission to secure and reinforce the librarium. Unable to determine whether or not Ahriman's forces were still present in the catacombs, the Invaders nonetheless acted with their chapter's famed recklessness and launched a full-scale assault, though Ahriman was long gone. An entire legion of foes could have lurked in the cloistered darkness, and still the invaders would not have cared. Yet as their drop pods crashed home, the invaders unknowingly triggered the complex systems of sorceress wards that Ahriman had left in place as one last act of devilment. Slowly but surely, undetected by the Space Marines who scoured the fire-blackened rubble for any trace of the foe, arcane energies began to build. By the time the last of the Imperial Guard regiments had taken position, Ahriman's trap was fully charged and burst into terrifying life. The planet rocked on its axis as the otherworldly explosion sent pink fire crackling through the catacombs. Whole sections of the labyrinthine archives collapsed under the force of the blast, and data stacks that had stood inviolate for millennia shifted and toppled. Caught full in the torrents of twisting warp flame, the guardsmen were incinerated to a man. Protected by their superior armor, the invaders fared better, though many were crushed by falling blocks of masonry or lost to the bottomless fissures that tore open the librarium's floors. Yet the danger had only begun. As Ahriman had planned, the barriers between the mortal world and the realm of chaos had been weakened by the sorcerer's explosion. Even as the fires gutted and died, the walls of reality were torn asunder and demons burst through into the librarium's great hall. When the Grey Knights strike cruiser Adamastor under the command of Brother Captain Kadaran Varn entered orbit around Jollana, the invaders had been fighting for survival for days. Under ordinary circumstances, Varn would have issued an exterminatus order. The demonic incursion was too far advanced for his strike force to contain with any certainty, and Jollana was too close to the heavily populated worlds of the Lubian system for risks to be taken. Those invaders surviving amongst the rebel were acceptable losses if their deaths prevented the demonic threat from spreading. Alas, in the case of Jollana, exterminatus was not an option. The data stacks of the Great Librarium were home to knowledge that existed nowhere else in the galaxy, and even though many records had doubtless been destroyed by recent events, at least some of the stasis chambers would have maintained their integrity. The Imperium needed those records to be retaken and not destroyed. Thus did the Grey Knights plan their strike accordingly. Varn ordered his battle brothers into the fray, though they would not land on Jollana as blindly as the invaders. To such an accomplished psyker as Varn, the minds of the embattled Space Marines shone out bright and clear, distinct enough to yield coordinates for the Adamastor's teleport arrays. Most of the survivors had barricaded themselves into a large antechamber, and it was here that Varn chose to make his landing. As Varn's strike force prepared itself, the invaders' barricades finally failed. Bloodletters and demonettes charged forwards, howling in joyous anticipation of the slaughter to come. Giving voice to a battle cry of their own, the invaders charged to meet the demons' onset. Here and there, a Vulcan roared, but most of the invaders had long run out of ammunition, and now relied solely on their brute strength to bring victory. Such was the fury of the invaders' countercharge that against a less numerous enemy, their valor might have turned the tide, yet here it would avail them not. It was into the heart of this bloody melee that Varn's strike force teleported. For a moment, their arrival went unnoticed by demon and space marine alike, so intense were they on the ruin of the other. Then the Grey Knights' guns roared as one, and the course of the battle changed. Those demons closest to the invaders were the first to perish, cut down by brief but precise volleys. Turning to face this new threat, the demons now focused their full fury on the Grey Knights. Again and again the demons attacked, tearing at their hated foes with razor-sharp talons and hacking with cursed swords. Again and again the Grey Knights weathered the storm. Shoulder to shoulder they stood, an unbroken ring of steel, each warrior guarding his battle brothers. Nemesis 4 swords hacked at demonic flesh with deadly precision. Storm bolters and psi cannons roared, bursting plague bearers in showers of virulent pus and punching bloodletters out of the air in mid-leap. Given time, perhaps the demons would have found a weakness in even the Grey Knights' stalwart defenses, but the reprieve had brought the surviving invaders vigor as well as time, and now they charged back into the fray, eager to repay their earlier losses. None who took part in the battle could say for sure how long it lasted. The carnage might have gone on for seconds, minutes, or hours before the choking tide of maddened demons finally slackened and the Space Marines stood victorious. Yet when the smoke had cleared, one fact stood immutable and unassailable. Through their timely intervention, 15 Grey Knights had rescued near 5 times their number of Space Marines. Though the battle was won, the wider mission was yet beginning. If any part of Jollana was to be saved for the Imperium, the demonic incursion would have to be halted, and halted swiftly. Varn sensed a warp portal's presence in the Great Hall as an aching wound on the firmament of reality, and he knew the next battle would be far harder. Even with their forces combined, the invaders and the Grey Knights were less than 100 warriors, outnumbered by their demonic foes many times over. Nonetheless, every Space Marine, whether invader or Grey Knight, knew his duty. Taking pause only to allow the invaders to replenish their ammunition from stores teleported down from the Administrator, Varn ordered the survivals on towards the Great Hall. With one last war cry that shook the vaults, the combined forces of Grey Knights and invaders charged once more into the fray. As ferocious as the battle in the antechamber had been, it now paled in comparison to the task at hand. Invigorated by the portal's pulsing power, the demons fought with a maddened frenzy. For their part, Invader and Grey Knight alike fought with stoic determination, paying no heed to the horror of their plight as they cut a path to the darkly glimmering portal, from which ever more demons spilled. There could be no slowing of pace, nor any token of defense for the fallen. Once a battle brother fell, he was lost to the demonic tide, and his only hope of survival lay in his own valor and tenacity. Scarcely had half the distance been covered when the last invader was dragged to his own private battle amidst the brain horde, and of all the Grey Knights, only brother Captain Varn managed to reach the portal's dais. Knowing he would get only one chance, Varn summoned the ritual exhortations and exorcisms that would allow him to seal the portal, but before he could complete them, a winged shadow sprang from the rafters above. Varn had not encountered this particular demon before, but he knew it for what it was, for like all the beasts that made up the Conclave Diabolus, its likeliness was etched upon his mind. Kairos, the Fate Weaver, manipulator of eternities. A greater demon so mighty that even a brother captain of the Grey Knights should be wary of battling it at anything less than the height of his powers. With a vile shriek of victory, the demon enveloped Varn in a roiling cloud of warp energy, forcing the Grey Knight to abandon his attempt to close the portal and channel his psychic powers into reinforcing the Aegis. Armor alone would only offer so much protection against the billowing warp fire that burst from the Lord of Change's gnarled staff. Again the fire came. Varn's armor began to melt and his flesh char. Varn knew this creature was far beyond him, for he was weakened by his previous efforts in battle. Yet the brother captain had anticipated such a moment, and had held the strongest part of his force in reserve to counter it. Triggering his teleport homer, he sent a psychic command that fired the Administrator's teleporters into life once more. Moments later, a Nemesis Dread Knight materialized between the injured Varn and his foe. Before Kairos could react, the Dread Knight's greatsword struck the Great Demon's staff, the force of the blow smashing it to fragments. The Lord of Change screeched for aid, and a score of demons rushed to his defense. However, the Dread Knight's pilot was ready for such a move, and his suit's Gatling silencer flared into life, spraying bolts of azure energy that slew or scattered the incoming demons. Taking advantage of the momentary distraction, Kairos took wing, but the Dread Knight's reactions were too fast, and he caught the Lord of Change's trailing ankle in a vice-like grip. Servo motors straining, the Dread Knight whirled around, using the momentum to slam the demon into the ground with stunning force. Before Kairos could recover, the Dread Knight brought his greatsword down in a glittering arc and decapitated the fallen demon. With Kairos' death, the portal weakened, though it did not collapse. Varn was now on his feet, suppressing the agonies inflicted by the greater demon's attack. He knelt before the portal once more and began the rites that would seal it forevermore. Sensing their defeat was at hand, the demon horde turned as one and hurled themselves at the dais, seeking to slay Varn before his rite was finished. Yet the Dread Knight stood between them and their prey, silencer spitting death once again as he shielded his captain. As Varn intoned the final syllable, an unnatural wind sprang up. It roared through the great hall, sucking the demons back through the portal, leaving only blood-spattered space marines and the bodies of the slain. As the howling wind died away, the portal pulsed one last time and shattered into 1,000 glittering fragments. All went unseen by Varn, for with his duty discharged, he had last succumbed to his injuries and let unconsciousness take him. Before they departed for Titan with their fallen, the Grey Knights made a great pyre of demon carcasses, immolating the unholy flesh with sanctified flame, lest its taint bring further corruption. Varn would live to fight again in the Emperor's name. So too would all but 3 of the Grey Knights who had fought in the Great Hall, though those who survived had earned flesh scars. Of the invaders, only a dozen survived, and none would be permitted to retain any memory of their deeds this day. Nonetheless, a great victory had been won. Though the rebuilding would take many long years, Jollana had been saved, and the demonic threat against neighboring systems had been stilled in its infancy, at least for now. Ahriman's trap had been defeated, though at great cost, but the Chaos Sorcerer was still loose in the galaxy with the knowledge he had stolen, knowledge he would soon use to bring the Imperium to its knees.